having donuts at church, buying birthday cakes instead of cooking them yourself, or even getting called sweetie pie at a grocery store. Here are some of the culture shocks I experienced as a French girl living in the United States. So let's French it! The first one are church. I've told you that already in a few videos, but church are really different in France and the United States. We have less people going to church in France than in the US, so it's more common to have younger people at church in the US than in France, where you will see mostly older people. But what's really weird and different is that in American churches, it's more like a community, so a lot of things are happening around the church. So people are actually coming back on other days than Sundays to do other activities, help kids sometimes, do a lot of different things. Also on Sundays, when you go to church, there will be a lot more than just going to the actual ceremony. You will have people having a bunch of donuts and drinks, coffee, a bunch of stuff, and people hanging out for like half an hour before church and talking to one another. And then they will sometimes stay after church again, talk to a lot of people, then maybe even eat together for lunch on Sundays. Things like that, which we don't really do in France because already there are less, I guess, younger generations, and the older generation, usually you will just go to church, you will go to the ceremony and leave. You don't really talk that much to other people or just say hi. You will not have drinks, you will not have anything to eat. So it's really different because it's more like one thing you do versus in the US, where it's an entire lifestyle and it's more of a community, so people actually really know each other more than in French churches, and they do a lot more. And it was really weird just to see people like walking around with donuts and drinks around the church, because in France you will not see that much. So number two are birthday cakes. So in France growing up, most people will actually always cook their birthday cakes. Like most of my friends I went to birthdays, they will always have homemade cakes. Versus in the US, where all the birthdays that I went to, even for younger people, usually people will buy cakes and not cook them. So it's just a little thing, but it was just a little culture difference, I guess. Where in the US you have usually more choices. You know, when you go to a grocery store, there is another kind of part and aisle about like bakery kind of. You will go to Giant Eagle, Walmart, you will have so many different things that are already cooked for you, and a lot of cakes that are really pretty and beautiful actually, that are really well decorated. And if there's none that you actually like, you can ask whatever cake you want with what drawing, and they might do it for you. In France, it's kind of harder to find things like that. Like at the grocery store, you will not find that many cakes already made for you. You will maybe find a few, but usually it's not that well decorated. And really, if you want a special cake, you will have to actually go to a special bakery outside of a grocery store, a specific bakery, and they will make it for you. And usually it's a lot more expensive than what you find in the US. So it's probably why also people don't buy cakes, birthday cakes most of the time. Most of the time we had birthday cakes that are just weren't decorated, you know, because they were just homemade, and then you will put just your candles on it. Maybe you will draw with the little thing just how old you are, but that's pretty much it. Versus the US, I've seen some pretty crazy cakes. So next one is also related to birthdays, but it's about birthday cards. What I loved in the US is that you had so many more choices for birthday cards, and there were like cards for everyone and every situation, which I thought was pretty funny, because in France it's kind of hard to find cards. Like you have some, of course, but there are a lot less choices, and they're so expensive. Like sometimes you will buy a little card for €5, versus in the US, where you could find even at Dollar Tree like a $1 card, really beautiful already. And yeah, so I love that in the US. I just remember going to a store and you have like everything. In France, you want to, you know, buy a card for a special occasion, you will maybe sometimes just even take a birthday card and just write something else on it, even if it's not for a birthday, because finding another card might be more difficult or so much more expensive. Versus in the US, you will have cards for every single occasion you could even think of, which was really funny, because the aisle of birthday cards or cards in general were so big, and you just had to search for like 20 minutes what was the reason why you were sending a card, and you will find a card just for that. And you have cards that sings and do a bunch of stuff, and for pretty cheap. So I really enjoyed that. So next one is small talk. So it's something we don't do as much in France versus in the US, where it happens so many times to me. Small talks is more like you just have little conversation with people you don't know while you're doing something. So like you're waiting in line to buy something, so you're kind of bored, you're by yourself. Some people actually start talking to one another, or you wait for the bus, you will talk to the person next to you. You don't know one another. And in France, we don't do that as much. I feel like it's more something like we like to have our own little bubble, so we don't really talk to people we don't know in the street like that. We don't really have small talk. I mean, you can sometime in certain situations, but it's a lot more rare. So it was really weird to me when the first time it happened to me in the US, because I was like, why that person is talking to me? That's so weird. Maybe I think I'm someone else. I don't know. I was kind of bothered by it because it just that doesn't happen as much in France. I kind of like small talks sometimes, just because if you're bored in line, it's nice to, you know, chat with someone, and like this you're less bored and everything goes faster. But at the same time, sometimes I just like to be in my bubble, and I just like to go outside and not know the people, so I can do my own thing and not talk to everyone. So next one is like calling people sweetheart, sweetie pie at the grocery store or other places, and I found that kind of fun and just kind of sweet, even though it just doesn't really mean anything. But before, I just found it really weird. I didn't know how to answer, because people at the grocery store in the US, like, to be nice, they will call girls like sweetheart, sweetie pie, sometimes guys too, but I feel like more with girls. I had a lot of women waitress call me like that, like, oh sweetheart, do you need a bag with that? Or hey sweetie pie, how are you today? And I just thought it was the weirdest thing, because for me sweetheart, sweetie pie was like little words you say, you know, to your loved ones, to your husband, to your wife, to your kids, you know, things like that. So it was really weird the first time I heard someone I didn't know buying my groceries and calling me sweetheart. I was like, what's going on? Is she talking to me? That is really weird. And I didn't know how to answer. What do you answer someone that calls you sweetheart? Yeah, my love, what do you want? We don't have that in France. People do not call you with the little names like that in France. You will never say that. If someone does, it's weird. It's not something normal. We don't do that. So that probably that person is trying to flirt with you probably. But we don't really do that. So in the US, it's pretty big. A lot of people do that, especially women to women. I feel like older women to younger women. This one is how much you go to fast foods in the US. So in France, we don't go to fast foods very often. Most people I know with their family, like for example with my family, growing up, I've been to like maybe fast foods once every like 2 months, or maybe once every month, sometime, it depends. With COVID, a lot more, just because you can't really go out, so you order food. But usually we don't go that much with your family. And then with your friends, you will go a little more often, maybe once a week on the weekend, maybe even one every 2 weeks, but not that many times either. Versus in the US, I felt like it happens so many times, especially in college. Like in college, it was pretty crazy. Like sometimes I went to Taco Bell like 3 times a week because some of my friends liked it, or I had another friend who loved McDonald's and we went going there all the time. So it's just a really weird difference, because I'm not used to eating fast food that much, and going to the US, I was trying not to eat fast food at first so much because I know it's not very good for you, but then you just get the hang of it and you're like, it's good, pretty cheap, and it's fast. Next one, talking about food, is how much people spend in time at a restaurant. So we don't usually go to restaurants that much either. It's like fast food. We don't go to fast food as much in the US, and we don't go to restaurants out as much as the US. So in general, we don't eat out as much as people in the US, I feel like. However, at restaurants, when we do go to restaurants, we spend so much time at restaurants, except sometime maybe if you're like in Paris for a day, then you just won't spend so much time at the restaurant because you want to walk around. But in general, if you go to restaurants, you stay a long time, especially with your family or friends. You could stay very, very long. With my family, sometimes I spend like 3 hours in a restaurant, maybe even more. A lot of time when you go to restaurants in the US, you don't spend that much time in the actual restaurant. Like you will grab your food, eat it, and go. Versus in France, you will keep on talking for hours while you eat. Sometimes do breaks between like appetizer, meal, and the dessert. And even after everything is done, you will still wait a long time and talk for hours.